Hello there. Welcome to Holy Moonlight Crusaders. Interesting stuff. My name is J. Dylan Proctor. I'm the Nazarene Preacher Man. We're going to be talking about what makes a cult a cult. And we may examine some cults from history, and we're going to be looking at Resident Evil, which usually has some amount of cult activity in it. I've never played Resident Evil 5 before, but I've been having fun going through the triple pack here on the Nintendo Switch. Though I'm tempted to leave Resident Evil 6 with that code that it's got there in the box unused, because it says it expires in the year like $27.99 or something crazy like that, and I'm going to have to pass that down to my family as an heirloom. Even if I have to spend another $50 to get Resident Evil 6 or something. The fact that you can get that code in $27.99, somebody a long time from now in my family needs to be trying to use that. I don't know what you would get from Capcom. I doubt there will be a Capcom by that point, but nonetheless. Anyways, here we are, Resident Evil 5. Looks pretty good. This came out in 2009.
I should have seen it come.
So it's 10 years old. There was a 4 or 5 year gap between Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5.
A new era of bioterrorism descended upon vulnerable countries, shifting the balance of power throughout the region.
Yeah. It looks pretty good. About 2009 standards. But I'm not picky about graphics. I like a good game.
City was inevitable. As panic spread, governments of the world turned to the Global Pharmaceutical Consortium, which formed the Anti-Terrorism Unit, BCAA. Operatives of the BSAA were sent to infiltrate and neutralize bioterrorist hotspots, restoring safety and stability to various regions around the globe.
Resident Evil generally has its pulse really well on the culture. One of the things that's impressed me about the series is how well they have their pulse on the culture.
It's Redfield.
2009, terrorism, stuff like this would have been a big deal. I mean, it's still a big deal now, but this is really what the culture was talking about. This is kind of where our common enemies were understood.
Tensions are running high ever since the change in government.
I'll bet. Intel says it's a haven for terrorists now.
And I'm not going to be happy to see an American, BSAA or not. That's why I'm your partner. Help put them at ease.
Well, I'm sure you'll do just fine.
Yeah, this is spot on for pulse of the culture. It's not really like PC watered down, but it's got its pulse on where people were thinking in 2009.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. It's nothing. Let's go.
And the mouth movement's pretty good too. Let's roll. I like how these two characters look.
Casualties continue to mount the long years I've struggled. More and more I find myself wondering if it's all worth fighting for. Maybe one day I'll find out.
And of course we all wonder, is it all worth fighting for? We're in a day and age right now in 2020. It is worth fighting for. Though the way in which we fight is a bit ambiguous. A lot of people don't really know. How are we going to have revival? How are we going to have a enlightenment moment in our culture where we return to aspirations, where we don't just want to destroy things, but we want to pursue excellence and things of greatness? You know, a lot of times we feel like this dude, is his name Chris? Chris Redfield, maybe? I don't know. Not familiar enough. I know the name Jill Valentine, and we were Leon in the last game. This guy looks a lot more masculine than Leon. A lot. But I've beat up on Leon enough. I like Leon. Give him credit where credit's due.
This is Kirk. Chris,
Captain Kirk.
Chris here. Coming in loud and clear, Kirk.
Yes, we read you.
There's a black market weapons deal going down in Kijuju. That's where Irving will be.
Ah, they did figure out how to do a better job with the camera control in this game. Big improvement from Resident Evil 4. Though don't get me wrong, Resident Evil 4 was still really fun. You get used to the very convoluted controls quickly. But this is a lot more fluid. Yeah. Very fluid indeed. So let's talk a little bit about what makes a cult, shall we? As stated earlier, I am J.D. Proctor, the Nazarene Preacher Man, and I run another podcast called Kingdom of the Logos, where we look at a lot of different things, a Christian program of critical thinking and adventure. And today our topic was what makes a cult a cult. And we looked at 5 different markers of cult activity and 5 different... Oh, someone's wearing out my phone. 5 different markers of not really what defines a cult, but signifiers, risk factors that someone is in a cult, that a cult is existing, and things of that nature. And I'll share some of those with you. The first on the list of 5 is that there is no value for people as an individual that are within the cult. And by this I mean the members. And also the way they view the world doesn't value people as individuals either. Usually, if there is any value placed on any individual at all, it would be the cult leader. But as far as members go, there's no value placed on cult members as individuals. The second thing that you'll find in their behavior is that there is an authoritarian leader that controls the belief systems of the cult. Again, as humans, we are wired to make decisions based on our belief systems. And Resident Evil does a brilliant job of that. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this game unfolds, because I know it's going to be a great template for discussing belief systems, because every other Resident Evil game I've played has actually been a really remarkable template for discussing worldview and belief systems. But in a cult system, you have an authoritarian individual that controls the beliefs of the cult. So the cult isn't held accountable to any larger philosophy. They're not held accountable to God. They're not held accountability. They don't have any accountability to any system that is larger than the cult itself. If the cult decides that they want to throw mathematics away, then they can. If they decide that they want to throw away the laws of physics, they can try. They can fool themselves that they have, and they likely will come up with something ridiculous like that. And that's just what you get away with in a cult. Some really dumb things, a lot of cognitive dissonance, obviously. But they believe basically whatever whim the occult leader comes up with. Number 3 is there is a lack of universal morality. Oh, surely we can break that open. In Christianity, there is universal morality. There's not different morality and different moral standards for different people. You all should live the same, regardless of where you're at, regardless of where you are in the world in terms of your authority and credibility, anything like that. You're all equal. Even people who are believers and non-believers will be held accountable to one another, to love one another when you as a Christian interact with the world. And universal morality does not exist within cults. There is a distinct morality between the cult and outside the cult, but also within cults, you will find a hierarchy. Sort of like the intersectionality hierarchy you see in our modern day and age. You'll always find this hierarchy of who is elect, who is not elect, how close are you to the inner circle, how far are you away from the inner circle, and you're held to different moral standards basing on your position towards that moment of total singularity there in the middle of the cult. Number 4 is there is always some unique opportunity being sold to people from a unique human source. In other words, it's something that they say, well, you want to have this power, you want to have this. Well, you've got to go through me. If you want that unique opportunity, you've got to go through me as a unique human. You can't get it on yourself. You can't find someone else. You can't listen to other voices. It's got to come from me. Oh, they actually make you use Y as the action button in this game. And the 5th unique behavior of cults is that there's an extreme disconnect from reality. And what's interesting is cults often, if I went over there and told somebody you're not down to earth, you're disconnected from reality, we generally consider that an insult. But in cult behaviors, that's actually something which is desired. It's something which is appreciated. You look at some of the great cults which have existed throughout history. Here in America, we've had a lot of cults. Heaven's Gate was one of them, which was a kind of UFO cult, but the leaders of it, Nettle, and I forget the guy's name that ran the cult. Oh, I've got it over here on my phone. Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. They told people they were the 2 prophets from the book of Revelation.
Come on!
Okay.
Okay,
Come
cool.
on!
Forget it!
But also, they told people, they said, you know, it's hard to be an individual. There's struggles. You don't have all the things other people have. There's a lot of responsibility in being an individual. Well, if you come here, you know, we're all going to get carried away by aliens in a UFO. So if you come here and join our cult, you can be disconnected from reality, and it'll be great. You can reject who you are. You can reject your own body. You'll get this new form of life where you can basically live in the fantasy that we have designed ourselves. Again, there's no external validation. There's no testing over time. Like the biblical truths, they've been tested by thousands of years. Nothing like that within a cult. Another cult in America, the Blackburn cult, which was also known as the Divine Order of Royal Arms of the Great 11. They sold people cosmic knowledge, cosmic hidden knowledge. And today, the belief systems, they sell people stuff like, you know, transgenderism, stuff like this, disconnected from reality and proud to be disconnected from reality.
Take your weapons already. Alpha team.
And these 5 elements really are behaviors that are indicators of cult activity rather than a Christian belief system for sure, but even other belief systems that,
Find your weapons in the case.
again, I'm a pastor. I fully believe Christianity is the way and the only way. But other philosophies, other things that people have earnestly pursued, cults are very different from those earnest pursuits that people have had, even if they're not the true way. Cults really are something which are a unique phenomenon that are more whim-based. They're not tried. They haven't had any testing. They're very whim-based.
Kidding, right?
You must find the man named Irving. He is our only lead.
So if you're out there watching this, send me your thoughts, questions, comments. I like to talk with people. A lot of cult activity in our modern day and age. To that last point about cults being disconnected from reality, a lot of times cults state something is going on that is the direct opposite of what is going on. And it's obviously like a contradiction.
Remember, we're a team.
And I saw a real life example of this in Walmart today, while also studying about the Blackburn cult, which was also known as the Divine Order of the Royal Arms of the Great 11. And so that cult, which I'm just going to call the Blackburn cult, it was led by a lady named May Otis Blackburn, and she started it in the early 1900s. It really peaked around 1930. It did some wicked things, and one of the great tragedies associated with it happened in 1929, but the real climax of this is around 1930, give or take a few years. And this cult basically was a cult led by a lady. It was very, very much biased towards females rather than men. All of her grade 11 people who would be the most intellect circle, they would all be women. But basically this cult was, there was a woman who told people she was a chosen messenger of God, and she had direct communication with the angel Gabriel. And if you would follow her, if you would give her money, if you would give her land, stuff like this, she would eventually bless you with a book on the 6th seal, which would be revealed to her directly from the angel Gabriel himself, and that would give you knowledge of things like the cosmos. It would give you the knowledge and power of resurrection, which again, this isn't the power of resurrection which comes from Christ, when there is a second coming of Christ, a judgment and resurrection. No, this was the power basically to necromance yourself, presumably. She sold people on that. But as far as obvious contradictions, there was a girl who was a foster daughter to a couple in the cult, and she died around 1925-ish, maybe a little bit before. But she died, and we don't really know how she died, but I'll get more to that later. But what does matter is May Otis Blackburn, who is the leader of this cult, she told the parents, she said, that girl died of wrongful belief. But there's still a use for her. You see, that girl that died of wrongful belief, she's actually become a celestial princess. And you need to preserve her and carry her around with us, as with the cult. And by the way, you need to kill 9 puppies and keep the puppies with her to represent the notes of Gabriel's trumpet, or 7 puppies, excuse me. And they did this. They killed puppies and carried the puppies around with the girl, and they preserved her using pickling techniques. And she evidently looked so well preserved that they would stick her in a car and ride her around with them, and people would think that it was a real living girl. And they did this for years. They traveled around with the cult. And I mean, just imagine being roped into this cult. Not only are you being sold hidden knowledge of the cosmos, but
Come on! You can't be serious.
now they've got a dead body they just carry around. Yeah, that sounds kind of repulsive to me.
You can't be serious. Come on! Roger.
These controls are weird. But in forms of obvious contradictions, the story that this girl was a celestial princess, that one day she would be resurrected, that she is the tree of life, is obviously contradictory to the way that she died and how they treated her after she died. Eventually, after a few years of traveling around with her, they built a mausoleum under a house, and the parents slept on top of a bed. Or they slept in a bed that was on top of a trap door. And the mausoleum was up under their bed. So pretty wicked stuff. And that is the truth of what was going on. So it's obviously a contradiction that the girl is being dead and preserved and her being a celestial princess. Like, those two things don't add up in a really obvious way. Like, you might say, well, maybe there's some secret way it is. No, it doesn't make sense because it's nonsense and it's wicked. And it was made up by a woman impulsively in a moment. So it's not like it's a fulfillment of something like Jesus fulfilling the law. It's not like it's the continuation of a long tradition. It's just something impulsively made up, and it obviously doesn't make sense. So cults oftentimes do that, and you found even in Heaven's Gate, that cult, which was the UFO cult that started in the 70s, they all mass committed suicide in 1996. There's a lot of contradictions in that too, things that just don't add up. They say one thing, which is obviously something else. Like, if you're going to be abducted by UFOs, why do you need to be dead first? And a lot of little stuff like that just doesn't necessarily make sense. And if they are the prophets from the book of Revelation, then why isn't there like a Christology that takes high importance? You know, like in the book of Revelation where Christ is Lord, you know, why is it just this nonsensical death? Alright, so we got some Resident Evil zombies, and we're going to learn more about them. Biological warfare, again, finger on the pulse, terrorism, stuff like this. Bad worldviews that are producing this. And we can make distinctions between bad worldviews and the people that espouse bad worldviews. Especially here in this last week, with all the chaos and destruction going on in America, I have been convicted that we have to love people that are our enemies. We want better for them because God wants better for them. God doesn't want people to be in a zombie mob. God doesn't want people to be destructive and destroying themselves. It's a very, very sad thing. That being said, we don't enable people. We don't just let the zombies get away with all their mess.
Come on.
The issues of A to call her is bad. Let's see if we can change that. Controller settings. Okay. Controller type D. L is locate partner. Right now it seems like A is locate partner. A is partner action. Okay. Is there not a version of this that doesn't have A as partner action? Okay. Well, they give you 4 controller options that all suck.
Doesn't move like any sound I've ever seen.
I guess Resident Evil generally has some kooky controls. I don't know who sits around and makes up the controls on this. Resident Evil Revelations on the 3DS is a superb game, but if you don't have a new 3DS, you might as well not play it. Or the control stick add-on, whatever that accessory was. That game is impossible without that extra joystick. But if you have the extra joystick, it is a superb 3DS game. Without it, no. And I know you can't open that, but I'm still in Resident Evil 4 mode, and I'm like, open that up, Leon. Get stuff out there. Chris Redfield looks like he knows how to use deodorant, though. So maybe he doesn't need to shift through things. He's pretty confident in himself and hygiene. Leon didn't look like he was confident in his bodily hygiene, so. But he did fight some pretty wicked things, so he did man up in the end.
I think we can get out here.
Okay, well.
Come on!
Okay.
But cults, back to that, they make obvious contradictions. In Walmart. When I pulled up to Walmart, they've got these loudspeakers everywhere, and it's like you're in Dishonored or something like that, which Dishonored the game, of course, where you've got the loudspeakers and stuff, and it's like you're in a dystopian hellscape just going to Walmart. They've got all these speakers playing these messages on social distancing and stuff, which the doctrines of demons are written with words like social distancing and crap like that. Today I was in Walmart, and they had this message that come on that says, "We are being considerate of you. And we're thinking of ways to be considerate of you and make things more convenient. And for your convenience, we are changing our store hours." And you hear a statement like that, and you're like, okay, so this means you're open at a convenient time, right? You're not like the bank or the trash, which is closed when working people have time to go to the bank. So you're like, okay. And then they're like, "We are closing early so that we can have more time to clean and sanitize." And I'm like, okay. I get you want to clean and sanitize, but the word convenience should not be used in the sentence to describe closing early, because that's very inconvenient. And Walmart's hours at the Walmart I passed by has been crazy. There were some protests and things and riots that went on in a nearby city, not even out in the rural area where I live, but they shut down the Walmart early a couple of times.
Was HQ expecting this?
Crazy stuff, but again, very, very cult-like thinking. They have no self-awareness. Writing a message that says, "For your convenience, we're closing early." Like, that's not convenience. That's absolute inconvenience. If you wanted to say, "We know it's inconvenient, but we need to close early to sanitize," I can deal with that message because you're not lying to me. But whenever you're like, "For your convenience, we're closing early," it's like that is a contradiction. A contradictory statement. Ugh. Grossness. And as far as that last bit of those 5 risk factors for being in a cult, the disconnection from reality does have a lack of self-awareness, to the point where a lot of times people don't even realize they're engaged in cult behavior till it's too late. Till it's way too late. But sitting there and saying like obviously contradictory stuff is so dumb.
Roger.
I also dropped my Switch right before we got in here to play this, and Lord have mercy on me. So I bought the Mario version of the Switch. I really wanted the Breath of the Wild one with the double blue JoyCons, but I ended up getting the Mario one because I'm crazy for Nintendo hardware. I like special Nintendo hardware. I have a Majora's Mask 3DS. When I actually got ordained, I was given that by my brother and sister-in-law as an ordination present, which tells you how much they know who I am. I love this Zelda Majora's Mask new 3DS. It is probably the coolest video game system I own, just because it just looks awesome. I mean, and the 3DS I thought was great. Yeah, it didn't have the specs of like a PS Vita or PlayStation or anything like that, or like a gaming computer or something like that. But oh man, and there's so many good 3DS games out there, and so many good DS games, and the Majora's Mask edition of it just looks awesome. But anyway, so I had the red JoyCons, and I didn't want to mess them up. Though I played with it for about a year before I ended up getting another set of JoyCons, which I bought the Switch used. I generally buy stuff used on eBay and whatnot. And I got this brand new set of JoyCons. They were the purple and orange ones. They're ugly. I think they're the ugliest color combination ever, but being in the born in the 90s and having Swatch watches on, I can't help myself with ugly colors. Like, I think they're gross, grotesque to look at, but it kind of makes me feel like I'm a kid in the 90s again, looking at some ugly, gross colors. So I bought the ugly JoyCons, even though I was much more interested in the green and purplish ones, just because I like green. Really like to have green and blue. Long story short, I bought these. They were brand new. They were great. And I dropped the Switch like the day it happened and broke one of the Joy-Con joysticks. And then I broke the latch on the other one. And it was downhill from there. I have dropped the Switch so many times since getting those new Joy-Cons. And I've had to rebuild those Joy-Cons so many times. And I've only had them since last fall. And today, as I was coming in here, I dropped them again and broke the latches in it. So back to the 3D printer to 3D print some more. Though the ones that are in it are actually Nintendo ones. I had ordered some parts for it. Or there may not be Nintendo ones. No, they are Nintendo ones. I took them out of another set of Joy-Cons that were being rebuilt. So they're not the factory ones from this, but I had helped someone swap the skins on their Joy-Cons, and the new Joy-Con set came with new buttons and came with new latches, so we put all them in there. And I still had the old Joy-Con latches, so I put those in this purple and orange set. They just got... So by the time it's all over with, there may not be much left of the Nintendo factory parts in there. Should be reading this since I like to discuss the worldview and stuff. So something about some twins, some codes. So people are experimenting. They're experimenting with life, actually, which is an interesting metaphor for cults. Cults like to experiment with life. Professors, universities, they like to experiment with people's lives as well. And by that is they push out philosophies, ideas, which can oftentimes have devastating effects. And people are just not held accountable. They're not held accountable the same way people who work with their hands are. You know, if you work with your hands, you make a mistake, you get your thumb cut. You make a big mistake, you might have to go get stitches, or you lose a finger. You know, you can do some serious damage to yourself or others if you do that. Or you can make a really terrible product that, or do shoddy work that, you know, people don't want to spend their hard-earned money on. But in the university setting, which I hate to beat up on our universities, I have some really good friends who are professors, and they are, if they're honest, and my good professor friends are, they realize our American university system is vile and corrupt. If you want to talk about the most sin-oriented wings of the church, and corrupt, morally bankrupt parts of any denomination, really, go to the universities. I hope that's not the case for all denominations, but most of the denominations I'm familiar with, that is the case. And pretty much all the bad ideas we have come from the universities here in America. Which is a big, stark contrast from where universities were in the past. Universities in the past were interested in innovating things, and now, if you take a group of university kids on a mission trip, I mean, they can scrub paint off the walls. And it's not because they're less intelligent or less capable than people in the past. It's because they don't have a worldview that's aspirational and willing to try things out. And universities cater to you know, don't become a man, don't become a righteous woman who understands what it's like to be made in the image of God, as a man or woman. It's just, you know, stay an adolescent child forever. Well, this guy's interesting. Literally, it's an extension. Universities went from holding young people accountable to transcendental truths and aspirations to catering to them. In other words, they kind of went to catering to the young impulse and the young naivete and affirming that, like, that's good. Like, young people, they want to throw everything down and burn it. Okay. We'll somehow restructure our systems to cater to that. It's so dumb. And universities have a lot of those cult-like behaviors in them. Total lack of self-awareness, totally disconnected from reality. They don't value people as individuals. They always teach some collectivist junk. Universities love collectivist mentalities, which is so sad. Coming up here with like a scimitar. Wish I would have had a scimitar earlier for a watermelon. Not a big fan of eating watermelon, though I will. But
We've gotta hold out till Kirk gets here.
oh goodness. Still trying Resident Evil 4 controls. I like this. It feels good. I know I'm generally baptism by fire. Yeah. I'm a big fan of like trophies in video games. Like I get that, like. Okay, we gotta go figure out how to use health. I think I've got health. Just don't really know how to use it. Okay. Oh gosh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I think what we're about to experience is something very bad. Oh no. Okay. Got smoked once. Oh, we've got a graphic cutscene for it. Okay. New buy. No, I like this. Well, that's like a good Shiva. Yeah, these are actually likable people. Shiva. Yeah, they've got likable characters in this game. I like it. I like Shiva. I like Chris. Yeah, both of these are likable characters that, yeah. She makes me think of Moneypenny in her actions from the new Bond movies, particularly Skyfall. think she was in Spectre. I don't know. I was saddened by the fact that Spectre wasn't as good as Skyfall, but I also knew that it probably couldn't be. Not a big Daniel Craig fan, but also, if I'm being honest, I think Skyfall is probably the best Bond movie ever made. And I don't want to give modern movies that reputation. But that was a really good movie. It really captured just about every era of Bond. It went way above and beyond Quantum of Solace. And I mean, I didn't hate Casino Royale like a lot of people did. I just thought it drug on forever. I was like, ugh. I just wasn't ever that intrigued by it. I didn't think it was the greatest thing ever because they were redoing James Bond, rebooting it or whatever. It was kind of just, ugh, this movie won't end.
Come in. The locals are hostile. The gate is sealed, and we're trapped.
But Skyfall, when that came out, it was like, whoa. Daniel Craig really pulled off a superb Bond movie. And the worldview of it too was spot on. It was basically breaking the fourth wall of telling people no, James Bond is relevant. Having a very masculine male hero acting like Bond does, which again, he does a lot of sinful things. I'm not condoning that, but sort of the aspirational hero going to save his country, doing some things. Yeah, there's a lot of womanizing and sin played in there to kind of sweeten the deal, and a lot of that situational stuff, like the cars, the women, is a lot of times what people kind of think of. But when you kind of step back to the fairy tale nature of it, and you've got this guy dedicated to the service of the country, there is something interesting about that. Something that is generally rare in where Hollywood's at now. Hollywood and studios around the world, MGM included, are kind of more interested in identity politics than they are good story writing. And James Bond was kind of, you could feel it on trial, and Skyfall was basically their argument that no, James Bond needs to stay. And they won that argument. They knocked that one out of the ballpark. It was a home run. And then when they were going to have Ernst Stavro Blofeld in the next movie, I was really excited about that with Spectre. And what I've heard about No Time to Die, it's like Chick-fil-A, like you won the argument. Why did you go and be like, okay, well, we're going to go bake the cake? And then what we saw recently with Dan Cathy coming out and getting into all the gross race stuff, basically having the conversation with the serpent that yes, the fruit is good for food, I think I will eat that. Having the conversation that demons want him to have, you know, basically getting on TV and like castrating himself in broad daylight. It sounds like that's what the new James Bond movie is going to do. I don't know that, but my expectations for it are low. But Skyfall was so good, it's like, why would you step away from the brilliance that was that movie? Why would you do that? And Skyfall also felt like a precursor to the old Bond films, with the guy that replaced Judi Dench as M, who looks a lot like the guy who played M in the classic movies. I mean, not obviously exactly like him. I can't remember the actor's name in either of the films, but just the way that they pulled that off, and it kind of had a realistic plot. Like, there was victory in the end, but it wasn't victory like you might expect, where everything is clean cut in the end. Judi Dench does die in the end of Skyfall. But it's a very, very good movie.
Come on!
Chris, Sheva, how you holding up? I'll be there shortly. Just hang in there.
We're holding up.
I need ammo.
It doesn't give me an option to use this.
Are you okay?
Oh, I can't use it.
We keep you waiting. I'm gonna take out the door. Find some cover.
Do we survive? Cool. I like this. I like the atmosphere of this game. So back to cults. We've been talking a lot about cults. We can do more cult talk. We do see this push for collectivism in our culture, which is always damned. It's always damned from the pits of hell. And I don't mean the word damned as a cuss word. I mean that is what the word actually means, like total damnation. The pits of hell love collectivism. And it sickens me that people in the church are like, yes, collectivism, collectivism, socialism. You know, Acts chapter 2 is socialism. And I'm like, you know, I read Acts chapter 2 a lot. I've preached on Acts chapter 2 a lot. It used to be one of my favorite things to preach back when I was learning Greek. But you know what? Every time I read Acts chapter 42, there's never a government involved. There's never any people saying eat the rich. There's never anybody forcibly taking property from other people. There's never any gulags. There's never any third party at all arbitrating the resources. There's never anything like that at all. There's just people who have handed over their lives to Christ Jesus, willfully holding things in common. There's no forcing other people. There's no marching through the streets revolution. There's no Bolsheviks, Mensheviks. There's no Lenin, Stalin killing people. It never happens. Every time I've read through Acts chapter 2, I see individuals being transformed and understanding they're individuals that live in a collective, as opposed to being a collective. Because if you are a collective, then you're legion and you need an exorcism. We don't exist as collectives. Scripture tells us we are our brother's keeper, not that we're ourselves and our brother. So all these people that love collectivism, it does turn people into legion. It turns people into a mob, where you don't have individual value, you don't have unique attributes. The whole notion in Western civilization that you as a person who may be outcast in society, that your voice should be heard, that's a Christian notion, that you as an individual have value. God cares about your morality. God cares about where your heart is. God cares about the things which come to ensnare you. All these are Christian traditions and Christian thoughts, coupled there with the Greek philosophy, really with Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. All that stuff is so important to who we are as people. And yet we have so many in our world. Weird format, how they go from one to the other. Okay. We have so many people in our world who want to reject that, and people in the church who want to reject that, and it's just gross. It's gross, but I know we have to love these people, and we want something better for them. I'm not going to permit the heresy to be spread. But, we do have to love people. Well, hang on a second. How does this work? They look identical. Okay. Sorry, I had to use all brain processing power to figure out why that was even there. Like, I feel like it's like, okay. Anyway, so where were we? Yeah, the church's infatuation with collectivism. You know, Scripture tells us something totally different, and this isn't an overwhelming thing in the church. It's overwhelming in the universities and the, I don't want to say the more idealist section of the church. Those sectors, you find sectors of idealism all throughout the church. But the people controlling our academia that have created their class of intelligentsia think they're being pious by doing collectivism, when it's just straight up insane culty grossness. It's dumb. Collectivism always creates suffering in the world. It always does. When you conflate the role of the individual with the role of the collective, that's always the purpose in it, is you say, well, again, it gets cult-like in the fact that you have different moralities for different groups of people. If you're in the elect, then you get hyper virtues and you get hyper superior spirituality. In other words, you can't do anything wrong. We see that going on with race and identities here in America. I mean, that's the whole deal with intersectionality. The higher up you are on that, the higher virtue you have, the higher morality you have, and you can't do anything wrong. And even if you do something wrong, people say, well, it's not really your fault because that group is oppressed, therefore you get a pass. That's cult-like thinking. The mentality that says, well, you haven't personally done anything wrong, but we think that you may have benefited from it, because when we look here on the piece of paper over here, we've contorted these stats to mean this. Therefore, it doesn't matter how righteous you are or how loving and compassionate you are in your personal life, you are guilty, therefore you are evil. Cult-like thinking. And usually how that is done is to make innocent people guilty of things they haven't done, and to make guilty people innocent of things they have done. And everybody ends up suffering in this. Even the people who are of the supposed aggrieved class, who may be fairly righteous people, and even though they're not being escaped of guilt, though we're all sinners in need of salvation, they just still get caught up in the middle of it. And it's very, very miserable. It's always a moving goalpost. Of sadness. It always ends up in body piles. Because you ultimately have to decide, do you want even scales or do you want even outcomes? And Scripture tells us that God finds uneven scales to be an abomination. It doesn't say that he finds uneven outcomes to be an abomination. And as we know, people who are given the exact same opportunity, I know a set of triplets, all born on the same day, same time. Very different. They have very different outcomes in life, even though they all have the same parents. They're all born, raised in the same household. Very different people. If the scales are even, and the family I'm referencing, some of the most honorable parents I know. Both parents are ministers in the Church of the Nazarene. Both mom and dad, ordained elders that have pastored and ministered. Some of the most fine people I can think of. But their kids are very different. One of them's an ordained elder in the Church of the Nazarene, and I work with her regularly, and a very good friend of mine. And the other two kids, they've taken a little bit different route. Very different temperaments, very different outcome in things. If the scales are even, you're going to have different outcomes. And God says he hates uneven scales, because you actually have to have uneven scales to have even outcomes. And that's an immovable fact. If you have lived and you have worked in a place of cause and effect relationships, if you've worked on a job site, you'll know that there's a handful of people who do a lot of the work, and then there's a lot of people who fuss. If you've been around cause and effect relationships, you can't live in this fantasy where everybody is identical at all times, because they're just not. And the world would be so boring if it was. Like, who wants that level of boredom? God made a wide range of creatures when he made the heavens and the earth. And he has blessed us with a wide range of roles and gifts and graces. So, I mean, it's totally fine to have differences between people. That doesn't mean that all differences are morally neutral or that they're morally good. It means that there's no morality at all within differences. Sometimes differences are a good thing. Sometimes differences are a very bad thing. But we're held hostage by cult-like thinking. And cults do suicide a lot. They do a lot of killing. The Mae Blackburn cult that I referenced earlier, she probably killed a lot of people. There was a lot of people that crossed her, and they all ended up missing. The girl, I didn't even get into how the girl may have died earlier. The girl that was 16, that when she died, and her parents, foster parents, preserved her and drug her body around everywhere before putting her in a mausoleum. When they did an autopsy on her, they thought she died of an infection that came from an abscessed tooth that spread. But they weren't really sure. They couldn't really prove that she had been wrongfully killed. They couldn't disprove that either. Obviously, after being preserved and everything that happened, and this is 1929, they couldn't really figure out how she died, but their best guess was an abscessed tooth had led to more serious things. Though if you're in a cult, that fact of how they died is very little importance to you. You know. And the Hammer horror film, Dr. Frankenstein, The Curse of Frankenstein, the first Frankenstein film.
Get in from here.
Frankenstein, he wants a brain of a genius, so he ends up killing one to get there. So like Mae Blackburn, she wanted a body to be her celestial princess. And you can tell when people get like that, they really don't mind it. If they got to kill somebody to get one, that's great. Because in one of the sequels to that Frankenstein film, he needs a body that is freshly died, and there's a girl that freshly dies in town, and guess what? It's convenient. You didn't have to go out and kill anybody because there's one that just conveniently died. Really doesn't matter. You're going to do what you want. If you've got to kill to get there, you go to get there. If you don't have to kill to get there, great. It's the deal with cults. They're going the direction they're going, whether you like it or not. But suicide and killing is very common. In our own world, the real world out here, one cultic side of thinking wants to destroy everything. They want to burn it down so they can have their socialist utopia, which will not be a utopia. All the people that they're promising life will be better for you, go back and read history. It's like Daniel chapter 5. Belshazzar, you knew what happened to your grandfather Nebuchadnezzar. Why in the world did you think that you would just get away with all of this? All of this corruption, this debauchery, did you really think there would be no consequences to this? So, same thing in our modern day and age. The history tells us, and I was reading a former KGB guy's statement where he said the people that were the angriest when we killed them were the university professors. They thought that since they had helped us out in their cause and whatnot, they had helped lead the revolution, that they would have power when it was all over with. But they knew too much. They knew how we got here. They had helped. So we killed them. We didn't actually want to give power to them, so we killed them, and they were angry about that. But we lined them up and killed them anyway. All the people that think, well, we will have power in this new socialist utopia. No, you won't. You won't be better off. History tells us you will be much worse off. Everybody will be worse off. Everybody might be equal in their total misery, but that's a very desperate thing. That's a very angry thing. If you just want everybody to be equal in their misery, that's a very, well, that's a sinful angle to come at the world, but it's also a very sad angle. Weird controls. Yeah. Weird controls indeed. Oh, we got dust bowls coming sometime from the Sahara Desert. When somebody told me there were dust bowls coming to Tennessee, which I've been joking about, corona-infused dust bowls, you know, having to wipe our eyes and applying talcum powder from the infected boils that came from the corona-riddled dust bowls and things like that. I've been making those jokes for a while. When I got word this morning that dust bowls from the Sahara Desert were coming, do you expect any commentary on that? The commentary writes itself. That's where we're at. I have been reluctant to get onto like 2020 is like a nightmare year and it's the true apocalypse. I've been reluctant for that because I really think if it were not an election year, a lot of this stuff wouldn't happen. But then again, I realize that our culture is going there anyway. The depravity, the possession of people by bad ideas, it's going there. So I mean, all this stuff has been festering. It's going to have to be dealt with sooner or later. So, and I'm of the mentality to deal with stuff sooner rather than later. But man, when I heard there was dust bowls, I was like, come on, this is too on the nose. I'm not sure if some divine authority is writing the plot, which I'm not like the fundamentalist predestination. My understanding of the word telos and teleos, all of that stuff, is that God has a design that he wants to call us to, not that we're all puppets put on a little train track and we have no will. But jokingly, you know, is this God writing the plot of this, or is this like a demon writing a really bad plot for the ways that he's going to afflict the world? Like some of the names that people have, it's so like on the nose. And I feel like I can't say that without going there. I don't like to be potty mouthed or have one's mind in the gutter, but one of the candidates this year, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, like when that was his name and like he advertises himself as being gay, I'm like, oh my, your name is literally like double entendre. Like the writers of this plot, like if you were a third grader writing a plot and gave people names like that, people would. Your teacher would say, no, you've got to try harder. Like it's just so on the nose. A lot of people argue that some of the biblical names have been changed to be more exact to matching the characters, the content of the character's character, rather than what their real name may have been. Because a lot of the biblical names, whether it be something like Joseph, Moses being drawn out of the water, some of them you get details on why their names are what they are. Sometimes people say, well, those names have been changed for the convenience of storytelling. But then when you see what actually goes on in the world, you're just like, I've got nothing. Which again, you don't judge people based on their name, obviously. But it is comedic to see how the world unfolds. May God have mercy on all of our souls and everybody repent,
Be careful.
confess their sins, and come to God and be restored. Because the world needs aspirations. We need to pursue the good, the true, the beautiful. Or to go to Philippians 4:8, the true, the noble. What I'm looking at right now is not noble. Well, I guess Chris and Sheva are being the just, the pure. This is not pure. The lovely. This is not very lovely. Things of good report. All that is virtuous and worthy of praise. I guess if you're going to Like Exodus 18, the whole idea of fear God, be righteous, and hate a bribe, hate dishonest gain. You know, Chris and Shava, they're doing that. They're being honest. They're trying to be righteous, and they are trying to stop the dishonest gain, this sinful advance of these monsters.
Come on!
Okay.
This is not human. Cults also try to reduce people to a level that is not human. In Resident Evil, you see that happening. The evil in this game has turned people into inhuman. You ain't lying, we need to be careful. We need to, like, get out of Dodge. That's what we need, to get out of Dodge Simulator.
Come on!
I'm coming! Don't be reckless.
Okay. Oh, more of them. How many of these guys are there? Did she just rip some stuff up off the ground? Yeah, but cults really don't like people to be individuals at all. And it's really easy to control people when you reduce them away from being individuals. And God created us all as individuals. The only minority that exists is the individual, and that is a biblical truth that took thousands of years for people to really understand. People always wanted to conflate, and the Jewish people had a hard time. You know, they tried tribalism because, and they based it on off of real truths. God did call the tribes of Israel, but time and time again they would misunderstand what this means. And God would come and correct them, and then they would have a little revival, and then things would get bad again, and it goes up and down and up and down. And then Jesus comes along and comes as human form and basically tells people directly, this is what's up. Did she throw that down? That's a very impractical way of going up and down. I want over here on this. Can we not jump to that? Alright, so we're not jumping over. I'm going to walk around. Oh, I thought there was a ladder there earlier. I was wrong. Let's see what all we got. Yeah. Because I've already been up there. Okay, so we've pretty much cleaned all this area out. We're going to have it out. Oh wait, I think this button is the map. Well, that's weird. Weird how these controls work. I really like the Resident Evil games. I wouldn't have consciously realized that a couple of years ago, but I've kind of realized I haven't played that many of them. As of now, I've only played Revelations 1, Revelations 2, 7, and then 4, and now 5. Those are the only games I've played all the way through. And like I've been exposed to like Resident Evil 1 and 2, sort of the old ones. I remember being around people that had them, but Resident Evil Revelations was the first one I bought for myself. And was kind of impressed with it. Though, was really frustrated when I got it because I didn't have the new 3DS yet. So I didn't really think much of it. But then when I got the new 3DS, I was like, oh, yes, you can put this in there. I was like, oh, this is a brilliant game. So how do we get over here? Yeah, had a good time with Resident Evil Revelations. We gotta get that way. Which again, video game logic. Chris looks ripped enough. And Shava, he's throwing Shava up on stuff. Man, he could pick her up and toss her over that, and then climb over it himself. I mean, she could easily climb over that. I'm not trying to talk ill of Shava. She's more than capable of that. But now they're like, ah.
Matheson to HQ. We lost contact with Alpha Team. They're under attack by an unidentified hostile. Reinforcements head toward the deal coordinates immediately.
71, roger that.
Move out.
Sad. God doesn't want people to turn into NPCs. And again, you see a lot of the same characters running around. Cults turn you into NPCs. That's one of their designs. They want you to be NPCs. They want you to all say the same things, do the same actions. It's not good. God didn't design us to be NPCs. Interesting little cutscene. This better not take me back outside. It's always weird when games, you go through like a door, and the way it loads you into the new area, because it's not actually part of the same map, it kind of positions you in such a way that you're kind of confused. Did I just come in that door? And then if you go through the door, then you go through like the loading screen, you're back outside again, you're like, no. Something about that animation going up those stairs looked really weird. Maybe it was just in my brain. Why do I feel like there's a zombie? Big graphical improvement between... Oh, I didn't mean to push that button. Resident Evil 4 and 5. Though, I was fine with the look of 4. I know a lot of people be like, oh, it's so dated, you can't look at the crude polygons. You know, maybe it's because I'm like the mole in Fantastic Mr. Fox. You can't see that good on a good day. I have bigger priorities than that. The gameplay, and also the story. Some people don't care much about the story. I do like the story. I mean, video games, they're obviously a form of storytelling. Now, they're not obviously meant to be dialogue like a book. It's not like I'm over here reading Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's not meant to be a talkie. Though I can give a pass to some narrative, basically playable novels like the Call of Cthulhu, which we may play online if people are interested in that. I enjoyed it. If I know that's what it is on the front end, I can be fine with that. But generally, I do like games to have a good story. And they tell a story in a different way than do movies and things. Hence why, I think that's one of the reasons why video games translate poorly into movies when they're kind of a direct connection. Though the same story can be told in video game format. As it is in movies. Resident Evil 7 tells a very similar story to The Conjuring. Now, The Conjuring basically is evil. A demon wants to attack the family, and the antidote is to have faith in God, to cast it out in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. in the Resident Evil 7, you also get that plot. Evil is attacking the nuclear family. In both cases, evil is attacking the nuclear family. It's the same problem. The Resident Evil 7's antidote to the situation is basically somebody has pulled down their pants to evacuate their bowels on you, pull their pants up and let them wallow in it. It's kind of what Resident Evil 7's antidote to that dilemma is. But the story of evil attacking the nuclear family are very accurate to where we're at. On the front end and tail end, you know, the evil, it wants to possess you. It wants you to kill your children. It wants to kill your future is really what that's a metaphor for. In the Conjuring series, you get that. And evil also knows the family is the oldest institution given to man and woman by God. And it's a very powerful institution. A God-fearing family is the most powerful force on this earth. It's people's highest priority for a reason. There's a lot of power in it. And Resident Evil 7 and The Conjuring do a good job of showing how evil hates families. It wants to destroy and rewrite what it means to be a family. In our modern day and age, you know, the commandment of honor thy father and mother is wildly broken very, very often. Hey, Tradesman Tyler just jumped in. So the Conjuring movie does a great job of that. Resident Evil 7 shows how, you know, evil pretends to be your past and your future, and rewrite what it means to even be married and things of that nature. Be under the slave of some tyrannical thing that makes you into an NPC, because again, a lot of cult-like thinking. Well, Tradesman Tyler, it is great to have you here. I hope that you have had a good day. I wasn't expecting you to join in on the chat so late. They're in the visual chat there on YouTube. I have done a lot of discussion today about what makes a cult a cult. And since you've jumped in, I'll give a quick rundown of my 5 risk factors, or you might say risk markers, for what makes a cult and how they're different from just other belief systems. 5 distinct markers that you can find in cult activity is, number 1, there is no value on production stopped at 9, you're stuck here till 12:48. Yeah, that's not good. But while I'm on this list, before I get disconnected in my own conversation, in cults, one of the first behaviors that you'll see that marks cult activity is there's no value on the individual. No value placed on people to think for themselves, to be creatures with personal agency and an ability to make decisions actually affecting their fate. The second marker that I've got here is an authoritarian leader that controls the beliefs of the cult, and it's kind of whim-based. It's not held accountable to a larger truth. It's not held accountable to a larger philosophy. And we've even allowed this kind of to infect the church, the whole idea that Jesus was only resurrected if I believe it. No, Christianity is built on the objective truth. Either Jesus came out of the tomb after 3 days, or he didn't. That is either true or not true, and it has nothing to do with whether you believe it or not. And if that is true, then suddenly all the theologies, the philosophies get very, very important. Well, cults, they don't hold themselves accountable to any sort of objective truth. It's whatever whim the cult leader comes up with, that is the belief for the day. And cults, they can change their beliefs very quickly. It can rapidly go depending on how whimsical the cult leader is, so that's very bad. The next behavior that you really find is a lack of universal morality. In other words, there's not a universal ethic for all people to live by. Like in Christianity, there is a universal ethic, and you're to love your neighbor and enemy as well, believers, non-believers. There's not any special group that is free of accountability, but in cults you do find that. You find some sort of intersectional, sort of like intersectionality hierarchy, where the closer you get to the top, you're not held accountable in the same way that people lower are. And it has nothing to do with the actual merits of the individuals, but again, the collective groups they're in, because there's no value as the individual. That's another very important thing about cults. The ancient cult of the New Prophecy, which I haven't talked about in this stream at all today, but I did in our earlier podcast. The New Prophecy, which started in the 2nd century, about the year 150 AD, Anno Domini, year of our Lord, was founded by 3 people, Montanus, Maximilla, and Priscilla. And no, not the Priscilla from the New Testament, but a man and 2 women They came together as sort of the unholy trinity that ran this cult, and they themselves had, so they said they received the Holy Spirit, and they had power even beyond Jesus to forgive and condemn. Pretty arrogant stuff. But they had different groups. I mean, they themselves were beyond accountability. They weren't even accountable to Jesus, as I said earlier. But then those who were within the cult, they were called the Spiritale, and they had a heightened morality. They were above the moral standards of most people. And then people who were not in the cult were called the Psychici, or in English, the Carnals. And they were basically sinful and depraved regardless of whether or not they knew Jesus or their relationship with God or how righteous they were in their life. They, just by default of being in the wrong group, you were sinful. So it's a very cult-like thing. You know, people who are not in the cult, they're not in the right group, they're evil. Sinful regardless of what's going on in their life. Don't know what's going on here. Number 4 was unique opportunity is given to followers and potential followers, sold to them from a unique human authority. And by that I mean there's a person that says, I've got this unique opportunity for you, but you've got to go through me to get it. You can't get it from someone else. You can't get it from another leader. You can't get this on your own. You have to go through me, and me particularly. You can't get it through tradition or anything else. Only for me. And you find this all the time. People who say like, oh, well, we care about this group or we care about that group. But if those people who say that don't get any power from a situation that would benefit someone in that group but not themselves, they'll say, oh, well, yeah, we don't actually care about that. And then the last one is, of course, total lack of self-awareness. So yeah, so production stopped early. Is that because of what happened with the people who got the Rona? Which I have started to refer to the 2019 coronavirus as Princeps Elector Corona, to give it the Latin title, Princeps Elector. Princeps Elector is a Latin title for a favored prince who has the ability, so a favored prince, so it's not a king, it's not a monarch, but a favored prince who gets the power to write laws, to make elections, to appoint people, to do things of that nature where they can make their appointments, they can make their elections, they can write laws and edicts and stuff. So it's a favored prince that has special powers granted to them by the true king. And of course the true king in our day and age, the idolatrous god of this age, and when I say true king, I don't mean like true king of eternity. That would be Christ, our Lord. But the one sitting in the throne of idolatry, the great demon that we're against, Legion. Because we're up in spiritual warfare. That cultic, demonic force, progressivism, the spirit of the age, whatever you want to call it. Legion. I've kind of started calling it Legion. I kind of like calling it Legion. Everything's cultish, so I guess it makes sense. Yes, it has chosen... Yeah, Riot's kind of faded, so it's back to the Rona control. Yes, Princeps Elector Corona gets his power back. And he gets to write laws. You know, he can write laws like they did over in Oregon. Everybody has to wear a mask unless you're in the right group. If you're a person of color, as they deem it, then you don't have to. Which is great because you know a judge somewhere is going to have to say the 14th Amendment isn't really the 14th Amendment. The whole idea of equal protection under the law is actually thrown under the bus by people who claim they want equal rights. It's amazing. Again, total contradiction, total cult-like behavior. Special groups, you know, are more deadly to the Rona. It's amazing because also you hear them say, you know, black and brown people are more disproportionately affected by the Corona because of racism. But they also don't have to wear masks because it would be an unfair stereotype. Which, of course, this is all stereotyping to talk about people based on their skin color. So I always love that, too, how the people who tell you that you can't be colorblind because you're not doing anything to fight the injustice They also tell you that stereotyping is bad, which is an obvious contradiction, which again is cult-like thinking. Furnace key, pick up. Pick it up. Checkpoint. I feel like if I were gonna give a rapper a name, I would call him Checkpoint. And at this point, I realize my mental faculties are getting tired for the evening, but that's okay. We were just in this room without a cutscene. Why do we need a cutscene now? Did y'all see how he opened up that key, like he gets it out and whips it out? Chris Redfield getting a little cocky over there.
What the hell is that?
Her eyes look a little more human than some of the people in these games. He looks fairly human. His veins are a little scary to look at. Something about them seems like they're not really three-dimensional, but they want to be.
I think that's what got Alpha Team.
You think that's what got Alpha Team? Does it matter at this point? I mean, it actually does, but at this moment, you know, you gotta smoke that. Alright, we're going this way. And another thing with Resident Evil is it's also unclear how you defeat stuff. Will like raw firepower kill them, or is it like a puzzle boss? Where like you've got to actually kill it by doing some sequence of events. Like right now, I know we can knock these over, which this is very much like a scene in Resident Evil 4. Oh, I guess he decided to assimilate that into himself. The board he does in the simulation. Cyberman. Though, again, Doctor Who, totally ruined by modern politics. Wish people could see the double standard. Yeah, people don't have eyes to see or ears to hear. But we have to love these people, and we want them to have eyes to see and ears to hear. Again, I'm not sitting over here criticizing stuff because I just want the world to burn. I want evil to be done away with, but the people that have been sold evil ideas, I want them to be transformed. I want them to be transformed by the renewing of their minds. Yes, somebody did a couple of months ago say that the Rona is affecting minorities more. Yeah, a lot of this stuff, it's sickening what is happening in our culture. But one of the best ways for people to have eyes to see and ears to hear is for stuff to be exposed. Shed light on the darkness. They're getting out in broad daylight now. They're getting out in the... You know what? I just got an idea. Again, because I'm not sure, is this a puzzle boss or is this just a powerful boss? I don't know. It's like Resident Evil. Your rules are not always clear. But then again, rules in life are not always clear. God does a good job of giving us clear rules because God's not a tyrant. Tyrants like you to have unclear rules. Cults like the rules to be strict, not necessarily unclear, but also kind of unclear. Princeps Elector Corona likes for the rules to be unclear. You know, like going to Walmart after a certain hour is more deadly than going at an earlier hour. Going to Walmart and using 2 doors is more deadly than going through 1 door. feel like it's a legitimate question to ask. Why does this thing even bother with? Uh-oh. I think I just smoked myself. Now in Florida, you can't serve alcohol, but if you serve it with food, it's less dangerous. Yeah, all this stuff is stupid. Which, again, I don't drink. I'm not a super big proponent of alcohol, although, if you want the biblical notion of alcohol, alcohol is something which lowers your ability to restrain yourself, which that's going to increase your chances of doing something sinful. But again, sin is an action. Sins are actions. So something like an item out there is not a sin. It's what you do with it. It's what you... And sometimes it's sin to make certain things because, I mean, you look at something like pornography, there's not like a good use for that. But again, if you're sitting, at home and pornography exists in the world, like, you haven't sinned because it exists. You sin when you interact with it. And that's kind of how things with alcohol are. What you do with it is what matters. And alcohol is a proxy for bad behaviors. American culture has a lot harder time using alcohol appropriately than do other cultures, but at the same time, again, if people use it responsibly, I mean, I'm not going to make up sins where they're not. But yeah, that's not the conversation that was really pointed. The whole idea that you can serve alcohol, but if you serve it with food, it's less dangerous. The whole deal that they shut down the bars in Florida, yeah, that's dumb. That's dumb. And the data come in. The people out there peddling the hysteria, trying to get everybody worked up over it. It's the amount of lying that has gone on around the coronavirus. I don't remember who it was, but the truth with the coronavirus and the big scam with it isn't whether or not it is even a real virus that exists, but we were sold that it was a low incident, high mortality virus. In other words, you could contain it, and where it does appear, it's very deadly. But in truth, it is a very high incident, low mortality virus. And how it spreads, there's been a lot of confusion and sophistry around that, which has been a while since I've talked about sophistry. Sophistry is something that needs to be talked about, because the Antichrist is effectively, or the notion of the Antichrist. The Antichrist is clearly not a singular person and or entity, as you find in Scripture. You look at the Johannine literature, it explicitly says multiple Antichrists. And in the time of John, when he was writing these epistles to the churches where he was ministering, it's very clear that there had been a multitude of Antichrist figures that were basically coming along and selling sophistry. Fake news is another word for sophistry. It's basically something which sounds true, or maybe it feels true because it feeds into an impulse or suspicion you have, whether it be a desirable suspicion or a desirable impulse or a negative one. It just feeds in something and it kind of feels true to you. And it may be true in technicality, but it's actually false in reality. It's false in its sentiment. And the whole coronavirus stuff has just been littered. Litter would imply that, like, if you're driving down the street, you've got a mass of ground and geography. And as you are going from destination to destination, you see a few pieces of trash along the way. That would be litter. No, the main road regarding coronavirus has been scam hysteria. And truth has been littered in there. Very, very low quantity of truth. This is how we're going to have to defeat him. Supposedly I have a hike of 9,000 cases. Yeah, cases... Well, of course cases are going to increase. I mean, now testing is readily available. It's quick to do. And people are going to the hospital when they weren't in the past. And to go into the hospital to have anything done... I know a lot of people have brought a lot of things to my attention. That are going on, and they get tested. I've known a few people who have come up positive. No symptoms at all. But, I mean, there are people who wouldn't have been tested in the past, but now you get tested for everything. And also, and I know of a few cases of this here locally in the Nashville area, of people who went in for totally unrelated things, like a hip surgery, and they found out they had coronavirus even though they were asymptomatic, but now they're a coronavirus patient. Princeps Elector Corona likes to claim all that are his subjects, whether they're actually in his royal court or not. Oh yeah, well, I think there's actually a lot more people. We kind of have this constant feeling that we're all alone, which, again, the spirit of this age. I think I'm going to preach a sermon Sunday. I'm in between sermon series. Normally I have what's going to be preached planned out well into the future. Just finished Daniel 1 through 6, the court tales of Daniel. And now going a few places new. I've got some other potential sermon series outlined. And it's extraordinarily rare for me not to be meticulously planned out. But this one only comes out through prayer. This is the sermon that I've been working on. And that means a lot more than just... Well, a good prayer life is a lot more than just a few words here and there. It's a whole life of action. It's a life of making choices that line up with the calling and teaching of God, and being assertive and being active. But we have evil forces in our culture which seem to have almost no means of accountability, and they have designed this. And again, I don't think it's like a conspiracy. I think it's just an impulse. It's the worldview that is largely dominant in our culture. It has designed itself not to be held accountable, so that righteous people don't know how to defend against it. Like, if you've got a job, if you don't live in an inner city, you're not going to be going to stop people from tearing down statues because you're working, you're doing things to support your family. The most likely people to be involved in this are people who don't have a lot going on in life. And which is sad, because God wants all of us to have a lot going on in life. We were made to be active creatures, living full lives.
Sheva.
Turning it on! Watch out!
Alright. And how many times are we going to have to do that? So this is why I feel like it's a puzzle box. Maybe shooting it earlier didn't even matter. But to the question of, will people wake up and see that the 2 weeks they originally asserted turned into 4 months? I think most people have woke up to that. I actually know a phenomenal amount of people who are generally completely disengaged from politics, but they realize they've been lied to about the coronavirus. And it was when the rioting started, and when they saw how, which we're to the point now where they're trying to tear down Jesus statues under really absurd and ridiculous arguments. And people have realized that there's a lot of people, forces in the media and Hollywood, social media that are just outright trying to manipulate and lie to people. Like, a lot of people have woken up to that. But again, the nature of this evil, you know, this one only comes out through prayer. The nature of this is not one that can be easily dealt with. It's kind of one of the sentiments there that you get in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9 there, where the man brings the child, his son, with the unclean spirit, and he says, you know, help, I believe, help my unbelief. This demon is not easily dealt with. So like that demon we were just in there, you kind of, you know, you can't tell. Is this a puzzle? Do I need to just blow it up? How do I deal with this? It's kind of how we are. Like, what do we do? This whole system has been designed, and when I say system, this whole belief system, it has been designed where you can't really hold it accountable easily, and righteous people aren't really able to do a lot to hold it accountable. T-Virus. Shava was like, I need to be here because people will be suspicious of you. Like, who? The zombies? I mean, they're going to eat everybody they see anyway. The people watching them suspiciously through the webcam. And look at that computer. That totally looks like a 2009 computer. I think my dad had an HP computer about that time which looked like that. Which it would have had an adequate number of USB ports on it. Computers today, they're like allergic to having an adequate number of USB ports, which I guess in this age of smartphones where people do everything wirelessly, a lot of people don't want a lot of ports, but it's like, come on, you can put the ports on the computer.
Only we could have gotten there sooner.
I don't want to have to buy a USB hub or some splitter or stuff that causes problems. I want to have fixed USB ports and enough to do everything I need.
Chris to HQ, do you copy?
A laptop should have it. And I'm being generous when I say at minimum 4.
This whole town's gone to hell. People here, they're acting like those Ganado detailed in the Kennedy report. And aside from that, something new, something we've never encountered before.
Our transportation has been taken out too. Requesting a mission update.
The mission staff capturing Irving is your top priority. We believe he may have fled to the mines on the other side of the train station.
Wait, we're the only 2 left. You want us to go in there alone?
Delta team have been dispatched and they're on their way. They'll assist you in locating and apprehending Irving.
But wait, we can't!
I repeat, your ming stands. We can't afford to let him get away. Proceed to the mines beyond...
And when you feel isolated, you know, the mission stands. Don't give up just because you feel alone. You're not really alone. These two, they have one another. But also in life, you know, we're not alone. The nature of this demon is to make you feel like you're alone, but you're not. So, okay. Sure, I guess. I don't know. I just continue. I don't care about leaderboards. It's like I don't care about those little trophies and stuff. Just go on. But you know, we've played this for about 2 hours. Oh, and only an hour and 40 minutes. So that's not too long. But we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. DS2 tomorrow. Yeah. That sounds good. May have to be helping some people out with the yard sale at the church tomorrow. Doing some good stuff with that. Maybe doing some other good stuff with, well, just a variety of things that have to be done tomorrow. Hopefully my brother and his little girl will come over tomorrow. But yeah, DS2 tomorrow night sounds like a plan. Tradesman Tyler. But again, I hope you enjoyed our conversation on what makes a cult. Looking there at some markers which tell you that you're probably in a cult, but a lot of times people don't realize that till it's too late. And also getting started with Resident Evil 5. Looks like a pretty good game, really fun game. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Send me your thoughts, questions, and comments as always. God love you, and have a great day.